June 6, 1944. Commander Samuel Dealey, captain of USS Harder, spotted 3 Japanese destroyers hunting his submarine off Tawi Tawi. Standard doctrine said, "Run deep and hide." Dealey ordered flank speed, straight at the destroyers. Every training manual said this was suicide. Submarine commanders throughout the Pacific called it reckless. They were all wrong. What you just saw was one file. The Cold War was fought in secrets like this. Cold War black files is where those stories resurface. Subscribe. New files declassified. What Dealey discovered that morning wasn't about firepower. It was about psychology in a way that contradicted everything the Navy taught. Japanese destroyer captains expected submarines to run. When Harder charged instead, they hesitated. That hesitation created a window, a fraction of time where the destroyer's advantage evaporated. But to understand why this moment mattered, you need to understand what submarine warfare looked like in 1944. By June of that year, the Pacific had become a graveyard for American submarines. 52 boats had been lost. Over 3,500 men had died in steel coffins at the bottom of the ocean. The Japanese had refined their anti-submarine tactics to deadly efficiency. Their destroyers hunted in wolf packs, using sonar to track submarines, then depth charging them into oblivion. The American submarine doctrine was built on one principle: avoid detection at all costs. When a destroyer appeared, you dove deep, cut your engines, and waited in silence, sometimes for hours, sometimes for days. You became a hole in the water, hoping the enemy would give up and move on. And this doctrine made sense on paper. A surface submarine was vulnerable, slow, and nearly defenseless against a destroyer's deck guns. A submerged submarine could dive to 300 feet, 400 if the captain was brave or desperate. Down there, in the crushing darkness, you had a chance. The deeper you went, the harder you were to find, the less accurate the depth charges became. Every submarine captain in the Pacific knew this. They drilled it into their bones at submarine school in New London, Connecticut. Avoid, evade, survive. Come back to fight another day. Samuel Dealey knew it too. He'd graduated from the Naval Academy in 1930, spent years learning the rules, following the procedures. But Dealey had something most commanders didn't. He had an instinct for reading his enemy, for understanding not just what they could do, but what they would do. And what he understood about Japanese destroyer captains was simple. They were trained hunters following a script. Submarine dives, destroyer pursues, depth charges deploy. The script worked because American submarines always played their part. They always ran. So on that morning off, Tawi Tawi, when Dealey's sonar operator reported 3 destroyers approaching, Dealey saw something nobody else saw. He saw an opportunity. His executive officer, a man named Frank Lynch, looked at him like he'd lost his mind. The crew in the control room went silent. One of the destroyers was less than a mile away, closing fast. This was the moment every submariner dreaded. This was when you were supposed to dive, to disappear, to survive. Dealey ordered flank speed, full ahead, straight at the lead destroyer. The physics of what happened next are worth understanding. A submerged submarine moves slowly, maybe 8 or 9 knots. A destroyer on the surface can do 35 knots, sometimes more. In a straight chase, the destroyer wins every time. It catches you, it kills you. But Dealey wasn't running away. He was running toward them, and that changed everything. When you charge a destroyer head-on, you create what submariners call a narrow firing solution. The target's profile shrinks. You're bow to bow, the smallest possible cross-section. But more importantly, you're inside their decision loop. The destroyer captain has to make a choice, and he has to make it fast. Does he turn to bring his depth charges to bear? Does he try to ram? Does he radio for help? Every second he hesitates. You're getting closer. And when you're close enough, you fire your torpedoes down his throat. Dealey got close enough. 600 yards, point-blank range for a submarine. He fired 3 torpedoes in quick succession. The Mark 14 torpedoes, for all their problems and failures throughout the war, ran true that morning. Two of them struck the lead destroyer amidships. The explosion was visible even underwater, a shuddering boom that rattled Harder's hull. The destroyer broke in half. It sank in less than 4 minutes. The other two destroyers scattered. Their sonar pings became frantic, chaotic. They'd been hunting a submarine, and suddenly the submarine was hunting them. Everything they knew, everything they'd trained for, told them this couldn't happen. Submarines didn't attack destroyers. Submarines ran. But Harder wasn't running. And that broke something in the Japanese formation, something psychological, something fundamental. They withdrew, radioing warnings back to their fleet. There was a rogue submarine in the area, an aggressive submarine, a submarine that fought back. Dealey took Harder deep and slipped away. His crew was stunned, exhilarated, terrified. They'd just done something that should have gotten them killed, and they'd survived. But Dealey wasn't done, not even close. The next day, June 7th, Harder was patrolling the same waters. The Japanese had reinforced their destroyer screen around Tawi Tawi. They knew an American submarine was in the area. They were hunting for it. Dealey found them first. 2 destroyers, steaming in formation, their sonar active, searching. Standard doctrine said hide. But Dealey had already thrown standard doctrine into the ocean. He charged again. This time the approach was even more aggressive. He brought Harder to periscope depth in broad daylight, tracking the destroyers visually. His executive officer begged him to dive deep. The crew was on edge, waiting for the depth charges they knew were coming. Dealey waited until the range closed to 1,200 yards. Then he fired. 4 torpedoes, spread pattern, targeting the lead destroyer. 3 missed, 1 hit, but 1 was enough. The destroyer's magazine exploded, a fireball that shot 200 feet into the air. Debris rained down on the ocean. The second destroyer immediately began evasive maneuvers, dropping depth charges randomly, desperately, anywhere it thought the submarine might be. Harder was already gone, slipping beneath the thermal layer, using the ocean's temperature gradients to hide from sonar. Dealey had learned that too. When you attacked fast, then you disappeared faster. No lingering, no second shots. Hit and vanish. 2 destroyers in 2 days. The Japanese were starting to panic. On June 8th, Dealey sank another one. Same tactic. Charge, fire, disappear. The destroyer went down with all hands. By now, word was spreading through the Pacific Submarine Force. Commanders were hearing stories, impossible stories, about Harder and its captain. About a submarine that hunted destroyers instead of merchant ships. About a tactic so aggressive it bordered on insane. Some called it reckless, some called it brilliant. Nobody could argue with the results. June 9th brought the 4th destroyer. This one was different. And the Japanese had adapted, or tried to. They'd sent a destroyer captain who was aggressive, experienced, someone who understood that American submarines were getting bolder. Someone who wouldn't hesitate. Dealey knew this too. He could read it in the way the destroyer moved, the way it searched. This wasn't a scared hunter. This was a skilled opponent. So Dealey changed his approach. Instead of charging from distance, he let the destroyer come to him. He positioned Harder in shallow water, risky for a submarine, but it created a sonar blind spot. The destroyer's sonar couldn't penetrate the rocky bottom, couldn't distinguish the submarine from the terrain. When the destroyer passed overhead, Dealey fired up, straight up through the destroyer's keel. It was a shot nobody had ever attempted before. The mathematics alone were staggering. And you had to account for the submarine's depth, the torpedo's trajectory, the destroyer's speed, the delay in the torpedo's arming mechanism. Dealey made the shot. The torpedo struck the destroyer's engine room. It didn't sink immediately, but it was crippled, dead in the water. Dealey could have finished it, but he heard other destroyers approaching. He took Harder deep and left the dying ship behind. 4 destroyers in 4 days. It was unprecedented. It changed everything. Other submarine commanders started adopting Dealey's tactics, not officially. The Navy brass were still debating whether what Dealey had done was genius or luck, but out in the Pacific, where men were dying, where every patrol could be your last, commanders didn't wait for official approval. They did what worked. They started charging destroyers. But they started attacking instead of hiding, and they survived. The casualty rate for American submarines dropped. Not dramatically, not overnight, but enough to notice. Enough to matter. The Japanese never adapted. Their doctrine remained rigid. Their destroyer captains continued to expect submarines to run, even as more and more submarines charged. That rigidity, that inability to change, cost them hundreds of ships over the next year. Dealey's insight wasn't about technology or firepower. It was about understanding the difference between what's dangerous and what feels dangerous. Running from a destroyer felt safe. It followed protocol, but it trapped you in a defensive mindset, forced you to react instead of act. Charging felt insane. It violated every instinct, but it gave you control. It forced the enemy to react to you. And in that reaction time, in that moment of hesitation and confusion, you could strike. This principle, discovered in the chaos of combat off Tawi Tawi, spread through the submarine force like wildfire. It wasn't written down. It wasn't taught in schools. It was passed commander to commander, patrol to patrol, in the quiet conversations between men who understood that survival sometimes meant doing the thing that terrified you most. The principles discovered off Tawi Tawi in June 1944 continue to influence submarine tactics today. Modern submarines are faster, quieter, deadlier. But the fundamental insight remains the same. In combat, the most dangerous thing you can do is exactly what your enemy thinks is impossible. The willingness to attack when you're supposed to defend. The courage to charge when every instinct screams to run. And Samuel Dealey didn't survive the war. Harder was lost in August 1944, 2 months after those 4 incredible days. All hands were lost. But what Dealey discovered lived on. It saved lives. It won battles. It changed how submarines fought. Not because he had better weapons, not because he had a faster boat, because he understood that in war, like in life, the deadliest weapon is often the one your opponent never sees coming. The willingness to break the rules everyone else follows. The courage to do what everyone says you can't.